Hello, Chris.
I am so glad, Christina, that we wore the same color shirt again
Yeah,
today. Amazing.
I know. I mean, we're right there. It's our
Yes.
uniform, right? We got to somehow spiritually connect and get the right outfit going, right?
We won't show each other our UGG slippers, but
Or lack thereof for me. But yeah.
or lack thereof. Yeah, that was like the weirdest Christmas gift I've gotten from my family
No,
over the past few years. And I was like, oh, slippers. Okay, well, this is what we're doing now. And I used the living hell out of them.
I know. Actually have UGG slippers as well. They're in the closet because I refuse to get them out because I refuse to acknowledge that it is actually cold outside.
Mhm.
It's California cold. Don't feel sorry for us. But yeah, my mom got them for me, and I'm like, Mom, and she's like, No, you have no idea. You're really gonna use them. Trust me. You can actually take out the trash. You can go to the store in them. You can do anything in them. You can be in the house in them, and they're so warm and they don't wear out. And guess what? She was right.
But California cold's a real thing. I mean, here we are in San Luis Obispo, which is not Paso Robles, which actually gets snow, right? I'm like, we're that close
Yeah.
to snow. That was a complete accident. I had no idea. But I was outside this morning. It was 43 and windy. And yesterday it was raining in Kingston. He's like, I don't know what this is. I don't want any part of it. Take me back to California. I'm like, no, this is where we are.
You are in California. You're just
Yes.
in a place there, buddy. Sorry to tell you. But you know what? It rained all day here in Southern California as well. And
Mhm.
just the temperature fell. I think it might hit 39 tonight, which
Ooh.
is illegal in Southern California. Like, take away that California card. I mean, that is ridiculous.
We've got our inch of rain. We're done. See you next year.
We had several inches. I'd say a good
Did ya?
couple of inches. Yeah, and in the higher altitudes, you can see in the distance, we did have some snow. So I mean, it was heavy.
Oh, it's so pretty.
Substantial. Yeah, it's gorgeous now, and but windows and doors are completely closed. I had to actually pump the heat this morning for the first time. It smelled really bad because I haven't pumped it all winter. Had to get the hamsters and the heating going this morning just to get out of bed. But as soon as it comes on for like 5 minutes, it just blasts me out, right? So I have to turn it off again. The cat's just like, what is that smell?
Yeah, I think so. We're certainly when we find our new place in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
And the hunt is on now, right? So that's going to happen, and we'll be somewhere new by March 1st, back home. And heat is important. So this house that we had in Santa Monica before, and it never got cold. And I put on a sweater.
Yeah.
And then 2 years ago, it got into the upper 30s, and we're trying to turn on the heat and the thermostat, and nothing's working. So they called the guy, or the thermostat people. I guess heating and cooling would probably be the more appropriate term.
The thermostat
heat
people.
miser. Yep. He comes over. And he's like, yeah, here's the problem. And he pulled out this pipe that is actually in two parts. It was completely corroded and rusted. He's like, I don't know how long you haven't had heat, but why is this now all of a sudden a problem? The heat was not working for 3 years. We had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that year actually that you're referring to, and that was a heat year. Like, I was like, thank goodness I have heat. But this year, this is the first time, and it's just to take the chill out there, just a bit. So I mean, if I didn't have it, it'd be fine. But speaking of heat, I'm gonna put the heat on you now, Chris, because we have something very exciting to speak about, and that is the man, the myth, the legend, Chris McCann. Do you like my intro
It's
there?
a pleasure to be here. Yeah. All right, let's do it.
Yes. So, start the party. I know, I honestly don't know where you're going, but I'm there wherever you are, and I'm going to pass you the mic, and do your thing.
Well, let me begin by saying I'm really glad that we wore the same color shirt again today. Completely by accident. I think we may have already talked about that. Christmas morning, I received a text message from Zachary, who is my second son. Sounds better than middle. And he is like 25? I'm horrible with dates. And he sent me a text message, and I'm paraphrasing. I'm going to look it up. And usually every year for Christmas, Meredith and Hudson and I go back to Chicago, and we spend a couple of weeks there. So we're usually there a few days before Christmas, and then we stay there through New Year's with family and friends and catch up with people. We lived there for a number of years. And it's also a great opportunity for me to spend more time with my boys and their family, and my daughter-in-law's family, and my ex-wife and her family. It really is one beautifully well-extended family. And we all, at this point in our lives, get along really well. But he sent a message. I'm reading it right now because he has a new girlfriend. It says, I was saying that if you asked me 5 to 6 years ago, if I was excited for her to meet y'all, I would have laughed. But my, how the times have changed. And then it reminded me of another message I received from Holden, my oldest, the day before he got married over the summer, and we weren't able to go, right, because we're being COVID conscientious.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you had told me, a number of years ago that you weren't be here, I would have been completely nonplussed. He's like, but now I can't believe that you're not here. And it's like, wow, what a fucker I was. As a dad,
yeah.
To elicit those responses. And that's clearly and ostensibly not Hudson, who is my stepson by marriage. Our relationship, it's very, very different. But I've known Hudson for, I think like 10 years. So I guess Meredith and I have been together for 10, married for 7, something like that, which is remarkable. And other than Bailey, my beagle, she is the longest relationship I've ever had with anyone. And Bailey's still ticking. And it got me to a place of reflecting, over the weekend. And I guess it was the weekend of the week or whatever Christmas was. And it's like, wow, how am I not that person anymore for them?
I'm wondering the same thing, because you really are the man, the myth, the legend, because all I know is the Chris that I met this year. And when you tell me these things, I can't even fathom them. So enlighten me and tell me, fill me in. I can't make heads or tails of it.
So some of this, I feel like we've covered on other podcasts, but perhaps we'll just start from the beginning. I grew up in Jackson, Michigan, which is a town of roughly 30 to 35,000 people. My dad's family was firmly ensconced there. We had a bakery that had been in the family until it closed recently in the last couple of years. For over 100 years. My great grandfather came from Poland. My paternal father, half Irish, half Polish, worked there. That's just what I did. I grew up in a bakery, right? So if we weren't in school, we had an opportunity to go there and make some extra money. And plus there's a chance for me to hang out with my dad and my uncles. And it really was a family business, and my aunts. And I was also a master speller, because around Christmas, we'd go to work, right? So the day after school, we're in there at night if we wanted to go make a couple of bucks. And it was largely a Polish bakery. So it's like, I have an order for Djokovic. And I'm like, I got this. I'm like, DZIKOWICZ, right? So I can string together consonants like nobody's business. Master consonant stringer together. And it was a really cool way to grow up. We had artisanal bread, coal-fired oven. It was a legacy. And I remember reading, it was a newspaper article sometime in the 70s. My great-grandfather passed away in 74. So this article may have preceded that, but one of the quotes was, and it had asked him about how he would supply bread to people during the Depression. So he'd been open, I guess, for probably 15 to 20 years at that point. And I guess 1934 seemed like it was forever ago back in 1980, but now it doesn't seem so forever ago. And he's like, well, people are basically good. And I knew that when they had money, they'd come in and pay. And then that's something that's always stuck with me. But growing up there, and we talk about where my food issues come from, and I could never figure out why my mom would drag me to the Sears Husky section. So back then they would actually say Husky in a sign above where the fat kid pants were.
Oh,
And I don't know why I'm so chunky. Why am I don't want to be a husky person. Well, that's what you want. That's your size.
you grew up in a bakery.
I had no idea. I'm like, I'd have handfuls of chocolate chips, blueberries, frosting, donuts. It's my relationship with food is not complicated, but it is deeply, deeply, deeply rooted. So grew up in the bakery, and then my mother, I think I must have been in like 8th grade or so. She would babysit, so very scrappy. They both my dad graduated from Western Michigan. My mom came like a semester away from finishing, but she got pregnant. Voila, here I am. And she would do anything that she could to make a buck. So she went to cake decorating classes. She babysat. She worked in a Hallmark store. Like anything that she could come up with to, come up with some extra cash, because bakers for family business don't make a lot of money apparently. And was very, very involved in making sure that we had clothes and food and someone there, because my dad was working second shift or third shift or whatever the night shift is. And she came home one day in like 7th grade or 8th grade, and she's like, okay, family meeting. My dad was awake, which was weird. Like my dad being awake during the day. My mom sitting at the table. My brother and my sister are there. And it's like, oh my God, like this is it. Like they're getting divorced. Like, I don't even know what's going to happen. And she's like, well, I'm buying a restaurant. And I was like, who's going to cook? She's not a very good cook. So the restaurant kind of became this really groovy place where my friends and I in high school, there's not anywhere to really go. So we'd go there. I would just kind of go up and squirrel away the key and then take it, and we'd go meet there and play cards and make sandwiches. It was really, really clean fun. So my childhood and growing up was very normal. I played football. I was actively involved in the school. I was class president, all these things. And I loved art, loved English. And somehow or another, it's like, I don't remember ever doing homework. But I did really well in my SATs and my ACTs. And I think in retrospect, I mean, this makes more sense. It was because I have and had ADHD, although it was not diagnosed. I was smiley, happy, whatever you need. I'm your guy, super high energy. And I would just fly all over the school and just spread good cheer. Right. So that aspect of myself is very similar to where I am today. But for a number of years in the middle of that was completely gone. So the irony in being class president and, being a starter on the football team and involved in church activities with the school is that I felt like a phony, and I felt like an absolute fraud. Like I am not the football guy. I'm not a jock in that sense, at least not like some of the folks who I didn't necessarily gel with that were in my class. Was not going to be an artist, although I thought at the time that it was something I certainly could do. And church for me was very okay. So I had a priest, our principal, who it wasn't our principal, it was our religion teacher, who had professed his belief that AIDS was God's disease. This is when AIDS was a significant thing, and that was God's way of punishing people. Father Grail was his name. I'll call him out on that one. Mm-hmm. And I was like, how? And he and I would spend time together, right? Like, I mean, he would organize youth group stuff and, and I was like, wow, like it just didn't resonate for me. Conversely, our principal came up to my friend Chuck and I on one of the last days of school, sat down at our long table. He and I were just sitting there, and he's like, I want to give you guys a piece of advice. And no matter where you are in life, drink the best wine that you can afford. I then stood up and walked away. And he's like,
What?
like, okay. And yet that was some of the best advice I'd ever gotten.
Well, question, was he drinking the wine when he sat down next to you recommending wine?
He was not.
Oh,
he was not.
Interesting.
Right. Although he may have been before he came in. It was a cool way to grow up. And then I did get fairly quickly turned off from the dogma of the Roman Catholic Church. Mrs. Miller, my freshman English teacher, she's like, I think you need to read this. And she gave me a copy of Herman Hesse's Siddhartha. And it was like my freshman or sophomore year. And like, boom, my mind was blown. It's like, oh, I want to go learn how to talk to creeks. Like that, the story of Siddhartha, right? Just leaving everything behind to include his wife, to run off into, we'll call it the wilderness for a finite amount of time, and then came back once he realized that really life was just about, taking people back and forth across the river, was profound. So that stuck with me. I was like, well, I want to talk to rivers. So during my senior year, towards the very end, once football's over, it's like, well, basically every artist I know that's worth their weight has explored pharmacology, and I want to start taking drugs, and I want to see what happens, because the sooner I get into the suffering, the sooner I start to accumulate experiences, the sooner I'll come through the other side, and I'll be able to talk about it, and I can help people. Very conscious decision. Like none of my friends smoke cigarettes, and yet I walked to a White Hen and bought a pack of Bull Durhams when I was like 19 years old. So I tried going to college. I moved to Lansing briefly with a friend of mine, Dan. And at that point I'm like, oh, like booze is great. Like I like drinking an awful lot all of a sudden. I never drank in high school. I didn't have sex until I left high school. I was like, that's just, kind of how I was. And it's like, well, this is time for me to start going down this hole. And then from there, I went up to Northern Michigan University in Marquette for a hot second. I had what I thought was a wonderful radio show where the prisoners in the state prison up there, I think, enjoyed it. I spent more time working on the radio show than anything else. And that's where I met the boy's mom, who was and is this just stunning African-American woman. And she walked into my dorm room wearing a plaid red skirt with boots. This is probably before that look was like a thing, although it was a thing for me. And she had some Rolling Stones album under her arm. And I was like, I want some of that. So from there, we moved to Chicago. That's where her family was. She was up there playing volleyball. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to go back to Jackson. It's time for me to go do something else. School was just not going to work for me. I just didn't have the tools or the discipline or the desire to do any of that. The easiest path for me would have been to finish, move back to Jackson, coach football, make my 50 grand a year and call it, right? It's not what I wanted, but it was a very conscious decision for me to go out and start accumulating experiences and start playing around with drugs as quickly as I could. Now, I didn't know at the time that I had ADHD and anxiety and depression. There was no venue or vehicle for me to be able to talk about any of that. And so it makes sense in retrospect that I started to self-medicate to find some peace of mind as a way of operating in the world. Well, pause there, because I know I just hit you with an awful lot.
Definitely. But I'm right there with you. I'm just curious, when you would experiment with the drugs, was it very apparent that it made life easier?
Oh, yeah.
Like right off the bat.
Yep. More, please. So, but the drug that was accessible was alcohol. Alcohol. And that's still the case. Right.
Yeah.
had I just continued being a pothead, like I think it would have caused a lot less collateral damage in my life.
I have another question.
Yes.
Do you think that it was your own free will that led you through these series of patterns or paths through your life? Or do you think that you were led?
So free will and being led. So my understanding today is that I chose those possibilities coming into it. So I believe I had the free will before I popped in to my mom's womb and came out as Chris McCann. And that, yes, I selected my parents for that reason. I selected all of it, right, specifically to give me the type of dad who just is filled with love, and also was not there all the time. And when I say not there, I mean just physically. He was working when I was sleeping. When I was working, he was sleeping, etc. Right. And for a mother who taught me how to love, but did so in such an intense and sheltering way, where it forced the chrysalis to quickly turn into a butterfly and go.
Huh.
So it makes complete sense.
So
looking back on it.
Yes. So where you are in your story, in your journey, is where you kind of wrote off college and you're ready for the big world. So I'm curious as to what is in between that and having your kids not really want to see you, and then where's the bridge from that until now?
So by the time I was 20, I had two kids? I guess, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. So 22, I had two kids. We had one that was miscarried in the middle of all that. I had a house that was bigger than my parents. We had a couple of cars, a motorcycle, beautiful kids, wonderful in-laws. I was working 75 to 80 hours a week running restaurants. I had picked up a nice little drinking habit and was absolutely miserable. It's like, holy shit, I'm 22 years old. I've done all these things. I'm making X amount of dollars a year. Is that it? Like, is this what I'm going to do for the next 40 to 50 years, 60 years? Just sit around and do this? Like, no, nope. Doesn't work for me. And I have this propensity for pulling the plug on things and blowing them up very quickly. So my brother-in-law and my in-laws lived kind of across the street in this cul-de-sac in not southern Illinois, but south suburbs of Chicago. And he's like, Grace, I think your wife is cheating on you. I think she's seeing someone. And I was like, oh, amazing. Because I was putting my penis just about anywhere at that point anyway.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? That was totally, and correct me if I'm wrong, a coping mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I've got some understandings around that. Yeah, for sure. I was not trying to hurt anyone, right? Certainly. And don't to this day. And I was like, when I found that out and I came home, and so I guess the boys were like 4 and 2 or 5 and 3 or something like this. I was 23 at that point. So it was 96. And she had left her diary out on the bed, and her now ex-husband had come back into her life. He was dating her when we met in college, and then she kind of came with me and left him behind. She's like, well, he's come back and I'm married to Christopher and I don't know what to do. And I was like, oh, I can make this really easy. So I just tapped her on the shoulder. She's like, can we talk about this tomorrow? I'm like, no, we're going to talk about it right now. And so you've got 3 days. I'll be back in 3 days and I want you out of the house. And there was no screaming or yelling or anything like that. And it was just like, okay, like this is done. Let's just go ahead and exit out of this as quickly as I possibly can. And we'll figure out how to be a part-time dad. Now, from then, right, so like 96, and then I'm running restaurants, and then I go from like the wholesomeness of a Boston chicken to the lion's den of work. I'm working at Hooters at that point and running a Hooters restaurant, which maybe you didn't know about me.
I did not know about that. Great wings, by the way. Did you know that's
wonderful wings?
Hooters is the restaurant where my family can agree to go because the food is good.
The food's really good.
I know. My mom loves it. Everybody loves it. So I had a boyfriend in college, and he wasn't from the United States. And my family took him out to eat at Hooters, and he was like, "Why are your parents taking us out to Hooters? It's a titty bar." Right. Like, well, they're covered and the food's good. I don't think he agreed, but that's okay.
Yep. I guess I haven't really been around. I haven't been in one in some time, and not because I wouldn't go back in, but so that lasted about a year, and I probably was not a very good restaurant manager at that point. And I was just trying to figure out what to do next because I'm in my early to mid 20s, and there's wonderful people around me that just want to go out and party and hang out in Chicago. And we're hanging out with Cubs and like athletes and Rodman and like that whole scene. Right. And which was so much fun. It was a wonderful year. But it did enhance there was no drugs for me. It was always just alcohol. Like I could just bury myself in some vodka and call it. But the downside to that is that, and while I always showed up for my kids, right, and was working, able to hold a job, but still very much growing up myself and trying to figure out who and where I was in the world and what I wanted to do. From there, a friend of mine that used to work for me, he's like, "I've got a great job for you." He's like, "I think you'd be wonderful as a stockbroker." I was like, "Okay." And he's like, interview with Morgan Stanley. He was a kid that worked for me at Boston Chicken. And I was like, "All right." And he's like, "I'll tell you how to ace the interview." So I went to New York. So I aced the interviews, went through the process. And next thing you know, this non-college degree having charismatic blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid. That's not lost on me, by the way. This is very much white privilege. Was able to talk myself into just about anything. And so then I go to New York for the first time. And it was like, I called my ex-wife and I'm like, "I kind of like it here." And she's like, "Well, you can stay. Like, we'll figure it out." And she's very supportive. And tried that. So I didn't feel good about slinging stocks and bonds, but what I really did like, well, what I figured that I had a natural talent for was selling. So my grandfather would say, "I can sell snow to an Eskimo." And my grandmother would say the same thing, but she didn't mean it as a compliment. You're like, "Oh, you're like one of those people."
Real shy stuff.
Worked for Morgan Stanley, then went to work for Payne Weber for a little bit. And it just, I don't know. Like I felt again like a fraud. Like, so I'm selling, I could pick up the phone and call someone and tell them to buy 100 shares of Viacom stock. I'm like, I don't know anything about the markets. I don't know, makes sense. But we did have some clients that we were serving that were recruiters who seemed to be making money hand over fist. Now this is the mid to late 90s, and they'd come in with these big checks and deposit them and invest them. And so one of them, and a brother who I worked with, and he's like, "Just come take a look at us." So from there, I'd started doing IT recruiting for probably 10 years or so. And high highs, low lows, would have money, would not have money. I didn't manage myself very well. And part of me not managing myself very well was, falling behind on child support. And my ex-wife was very, very gracious and remains gracious to this day. But then while I'm living in Chicago and I took over a studio apartment with a coworker, I met someone else. We had sex. She was pregnant. And then that's when everything became really intense for me. So did not bring out the best in me. It was very hard because the first time I got someone pregnant, we got married and we gave it a go and bought a house and all that. And this time we tried living together, wasn't working, wasn't really healthy, and it wasn't abusive, like mentally or emotionally. It wasn't, we're trying to make something out of nothing. And I started bartending at that point. It was the recruiting business had lined up, and there I am again behind the bar with, a jukebox, willing co-conspirators, a pack of cigarettes, and some vodka. And it was like the best job in the world if it wasn't for the customers. So then I bartended for a while, and of course, in true Chris fashion, because I wanted to do the right thing and make it work, I still have Holden and Zachary that I'm taking care of, and therefore, and going back and forth to baseball practice, hockey practice, all that. That was largely how I spent my time. In retrospect, I didn't really have any friends. I didn't have too many relationships or deep relationships, because most people that were my age couldn't relate. They didn't have kids. The people where I was going through the same motions with them were my age now, which is, in their mid to late 40s. So I didn't have anyone to help say, hey, maybe think of this slightly differently, or I see that you're struggling, let's talk through this. And I'm not blaming anyone. It's just, I didn't put myself in a position where I had access to that, or that I was actually willing to ask for help. Right. And then I thought I had it. Like, I'm paying my bills, taking care of my kids, drinking, and rinse and repeat. Relationships at that point were, I guess I'm skipping a large chunk there, but relationships, I had like the best one-day relationships. I was a serial monogamist. So like spend like 2 or 3 days with someone, and then it's like, well, I can't let them know who I really am, because there's no depth or substance here, and I'm really struggling, even though I had like a nice address in Chicago. I was like, in the Gold Coast or this. So, but once you'd like look below the surface, you'd realize quickly that there's either no substance or there's someone who's really struggling. And I remember seminal moments now where people like, yeah, there's no there. So like, peace out, right? Sort of thing.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember those. I mean, there were messages for sure, right? If I'm still remembering them to this day. And so with the relationship with the woman out in the west suburbs, it was awful. God, yeah, the whole thing was really awful. And because I'm trying to make something work that clearly was not supposed to work. We'd had a son. He's probably 3 years old. This was the last time I saw him.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And I had to make a decision. And it was either going to be him or me. And I mean this from a very loving place, and that either I had to stop everything that I was doing and get right, or going to end up dead. I am pretty convinced that I would have run my car into somebody else's car half accidentally, as part of like a DUI or something along those lines. I had, it was just not in a good spot mentally or emotionally or any of it. And I'd had a DUI at that point, right? So already having one of them was when I was still married to the first wife. So that was not her seeing someone else. I mean, I did a myriad of things that got her to the point where she would even entertain someone else. That's right. On me. So it was like, well, it was the hardest, and yet it was the easiest decision I've ever made, was to give him up for adoption.
I see where this has gone. Yes. Okay.
All right. And I guess he's probably like 13 or 14 now. Yeah, this is pre-Meredith for sure. So probably older, probably 15. And Meredith and knows all about it, right? So at some point he'll come back in and we'll start to investigate, the hows and whys and the agreements that are behind all of it. But if I had stayed there and I would have ended up living like in Plainfield or Joliet or somewhere out there and not taking care of myself, and I wouldn't have been any good to anyone. So thankfully, I was kind of boxed into a corner on that and had to make the decision, and it saved my life. It's really the best thing for me. It was the best thing for Holden and Zachary. And even though the next few years were hard for them, because then I wasn't around and I was just cleaning up my own stuff and trying to get myself right, that thankfully it's kind of all turned out well to this point. So I'll pause there again and see if you have any questions.
I do. Do you, so this decision to put him up for adoption was made with the woman, right?
Yes.
Okay. No,
So the woman, she still, Sue, we'll call her Sue.
Okay.
Sue still has him. She's remarried. He adopted.
I see what you did. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you both decided to give him up for adoption to somebody completely different, but he stayed with her. I get it.
Yeah. I wouldn't have done that. I think I would have just grabbed the kid at that point, moved back to Michigan, hold up my parents' basement and figured it out. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think I have other questions as well. So what did you do in those 2 years? You said that a couple of years, that's when you started to get things straight. Did you go to rehab? What did you do?
No, because I didn't have a problem, you see.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah. I did more and more of the same thing, expecting different results. More dating, more serial girlfriends. Generally, they had kids too, not in all cases, but in some cases or most cases. And it was all over. This is like dating apps had just come around too. So I just hang around in hotel bars in Chicago and find someone that was in town, do that. It was, yeah. It's like, why was I not around the boys? Child support. So in as much as there's that I ended up with, a significant amount of back support, close to 6 figures. And that's a hard thing for a kid to hear about when it comes to their dad.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that, the IRS owed a bunch of people money, the state of Illinois, because that was literally like hand to mouth, couch surfing, renting bedrooms from people, trying to make things work, buying bad cars, just bad decision after bad decision. And it's such an interesting wheel to be on, where it's like every decision you make just leads to another worse situation. And I could understand, it's like, well, this is how people end up in the system and they can't get out, because like the system then just keeps clawing at you and it's like, I couldn't stay out of a courthouse for whatever reason, like child support or back payments, or just like the goofiest shit. Yeah, like I bought a car and then there was like a weird title thing. So there's like all sorts of like odd, desperate situations you find yourself in because you are desperate, and then people just take advantage of that. Like, oh, I got a solution for you. So the good news today is that, all that is long taken care of. Our financial stuff is in a great situation. We have zero debt. We have savings. This is pre-Meredith anyhow. And, child support was paid off years ago. So I remember walking into the judge's chambers with my ex-wife, and the judge was like, I don't know how you're going to do it. And I was like, well, we're going to just do it one bite at a time. Right. And Tanessa, Sue, to her credit, knew that it was best for her boys and best for me to make sure that we got everything squared away. And I'm leaving some things out, but to say that I owed 6 figures and child support and back payments, with including interest and things like that, was no small feat. So cleaning that up was a significant move in the right direction.
I know at the time it probably sucked really bad. The whole thing, self-created, of course, right? Yeah, all of it self-created. But I think that really colorful kind of portfolio of experiences in a lot of things makes you a better man today. So I'm curious, if you could go back in time and tell something to Chris, let's say in college, what would you say?
Leave.
Okay, that was easy.
It's a sucker's bet. Yeah.
So my next question is, after your divorce to your first wife,
yes,
what would you tell Chris?
Don't hurt anyone.
And for Chris, with the new baby that knows that you're headed to nowhere really fast, what would you say to that, Chris?
Work on yourself.
Do you think the Chris's would have listened to any of that at any stage?
I think they did.
I see. So you had the wisdom within you.
Somewhere. And it got to the point, and I had then remembered, so smoking 2 packs a day from the time that I was 18. So smoking went from me, and trying to quickly, implode so that I could recreate into a 2-pack a day habit where I had really shitty looking teeth and the whole thing. Right. I was that dad at the baseball practice, standing along the fence, smoking a cigarette.
Oh, yeah. You don't even look like that now. How you must have changed your appearance around.
I haven't. I'll just throw some pictures up here, and I look like a big old fat red thumb. Yeah,
what?
Bad. Oh yeah, there's more there.
Looking at you now, I wouldn't guess that you had that kind of past at all, because the people I know with that kind of past don't look like what you look like. So I'm not saying that you're supposed to look like a certain way, but I would say that you probably look like you're a smoker. I mean, that's fair to say. And you probably look like you maybe don't take care of yourself so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll cover that. But I remember when I was like 37. What year is this? I don't know. I'm horrible with dates, but I must have been around 37, 38. And I was like, okay, I created all this. I brought all this on myself, and I had football scholarship. I had like everything. Like I could have just done that and things would have been okay. But if you don't pull yourself out of it now, you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to end up dead. And even worse, you might end up hurting other people. And then I was like, fuck, is this a 20-year experiment that I let go on too far and I don't know how to get myself out of it? Right. I didn't know that I could go get help. But what I started doing was a significant amount of self-examination. And this was not something that came easily to me. So part of this radical self-examination was, if life is not working for me the way that it is, and this included getting, this is how naive I am. When I lived in Lincoln Park, must have been like 2:00 in the morning. And this is pre-Meredith, but post like rescuing Bailey. And I'd been out, I was pretty hammered, and I went downstairs from, the two flat or whatever it's called. And these 2 girls roll into the street at 2:30 in the morning, like, hey, we need to use the bathroom. Is it okay? And Right. And I go, what are the odds of this? Like me being drunk and horny and having two girls like rolling up into the street, like wanting to use the bathroom. I'm like, sure, ladies, come on up. And ended up getting rolled and maced and my wallet taken, laptops, the whole thing. I can laugh about it now because I don't even know that I've told Meredith this. And
I'm sorry to laugh because I'm sure it was not funny at the time.
oh no, like it's my work computer, right? And like this is all the cash. Like I had just like gotten my first like 6-figure job and like talking myself into and mind you, and I was making like 25 to 30,000. I went from like 25 to 30 up to like 100,000 like in one job, like consistently. And it was like, oh my God, like I just lost everything. And so that for me was like, well, this isn't cute anymore because now I'm getting close to 40. And I'm about to shit my pants because I just got maced at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like nothing good is going to come out of this. But here's the sick part.
That
This
wasn't the
girl that I
sick
was
part.
dating, no, this girl that I was dating at the time, and I called her and I'm like, I just, this is just come on over. And so my using sex as a way to connect or to heal or to express, or it's the only way that I knew how to try and connect with someone. And then it wasn't abusive. It's not where it's coming from, but it was very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wow, like did I really just call this person like the next day? Like I'm thinking more clearly, I'm like, did I really call her and have her come over at 3:30 in the morning after I just got maced by a couple of like pros? Like not good. So then, and this is all in the public domain, which is really funny, like this conversation. Oh man. Um so from there, it's like I just like this isn't working. Right. So do you remember the Seinfeld episode when George's life wasn't working and he just started doing the exact opposite? And like
I
all of a
have,
sudden he was brilliant and got promoted to like the GM of the Yankees or something.
that does sound kind of on par, but
Okay.
yes, or no, I have not seen that.
All right. I was like, well, if I'm doing these things and I think I'm making rational decisions, then doing the exact opposite is got to give me completely different results. Like I am out of like I have to try something, and did, and so didn't stop drinking, but I slowed the drinking down. Went to the doctor, like you have a problem, and this is all not mental or emotional. This is all just physical. I was 245 pounds, cholesterol, liver shot, um, everything. So from there, I then I went to Trunk Club. It's like I have to have someone. I don't need to buy Costco clothes anymore. I mean, my kids are okay, and I'm catching up on support. So let's just go ahead and figure this out. And then from there, I'm dating and doing opposites, and I call it, or Meredith and I call this the upswing. So I'd already pre Meredith, like kind of gotten much of that at least containerized, and then started going into this upswing period of my life and taking care of myself. And fortunately, the one thing that was really interesting about my relationship with her is like I'm just going to be honest with her about everything from the beginning. We'll see how that works.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we did. Like our first date was magical, right? She walked in and I don't know if her parents are going to listen to this, but it was a wonderful evening.
Oh, that was
the
fast.
people the people in the bar were like cheering because they'd gotten to know me, and her and I are out there kissing on the sidewalk, right? Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then we tried it again a couple of days later to make sure it wasn't just the beer talking or the Chicago summer. And the benefit of being honest is she had asked me if I want any more kids, and I just started like, no, I'm like, I'm good. Like, I don't need to be bringing any other kids into the world. And from there, we started to align on our values, and it really encouraged me and gave me space and a pretty wide berth, in all honesty, to just start getting things in order, and to include my health and how I treated relationship, and um, not that I needed help paying back child support or anything like that, but just I could be honest about where I was and still be worthy of love anyway. Right. So, and that took time, and it took time for the boys to come around. They didn't meet Meredith and Hudson until 6 months, 9 months before we were leaving Chicago. But all that was very much out in the open with Meredith. We had a healthy relationship, and we had to work through getting custody from, Hudson's dad, or at least being able to move him out of state. And so that brought a lot of things up. Like, if there were any other demons, I mean, this fucker was going through any public record, hired private investigators. I mean, the whole thing was like super, super intense. So I'm glad I'm glad anyway that I was very open and honest about stuff, but there wasn't anything that was a surprise. So, yeah, that's that part. So what I ended up doing, though, was I went from 245 eventually down to 188. I think this is worth noting because I was paying attention to my health, but in the true addictive personality style, I went from, fat to fit pretty quickly. And I lost like 50 pounds in 2013. And I went from the couch to competing in CrossFit competitions, triathlons, marathons. I eventually quit smoking, and vaping was another interesting aspect of that. So, and as I was vaping, this is early days of vaping, and part of getting my blood test done on a regular basis, Christina, was understanding that my testosterone was like a thing. So overnight, I had the testosterone of like a 75 or 80-year-old man because of the propylene glycol that was in the vaping pens. So from there, I just quit smoking. I had like a chest X-ray and the whole thing, and
Oh, wow.
my thyroid wasn't functioning. So just going to the doctor made such a huge dent. And once I got my thyroid fixed, like everything else just started to kind of snap into place. I mean, I was operating without a governor, and I was huge and red and blotchy, and like that element of necessary self-care. And thankfully I had insurance, really kind of helped right the ship.
Oh my. I mean, well, first of all, I'm not surprised that, of course, you're running marathons and doing all of those things. And of course, you did a lot of hard things to recover, because what I'm seeing is a theme, and just your tenacity, and the fact that you shapeshifted into all of these roles and scripts that you created and did just fine with them, but inside you weren't fine, of course. But,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not surprised by any of this. But I think when I look at the whole thing, I think this is almost the secret to you being a great coach as well. Because, oh yes, you do have a colorful past, but you did a lot of things that people want to do, or do they? They've yet to discover.
Like, put your penis inside of everything and drink and have,
I mean,
yeah.
but what I'm saying is that anything that you decided, you did. You were like, okay, I'm just going to do that, do this. So it's almost like you are an expert at the energy needed to do these big things, to do these things that some people don't have the hard wiring for. And I think that's where this, to me, is a secret sauce that you have, where you have that energy and people can feed off of that energy and experience that energy and take a little for themselves and replicate it, or make more of it and apply it to their own lives. So I think you are just a testament to what you can do in life if you set your mind to it. And I know that's so cliche to say that, because this is not a cliche story at all. There's nothing about this that's like, oh, well, that's a normal kind of thing. No, I mean, your story, first of all, I'm hanging on every word, because I'm like, then what happens? Then what happens? You know? I mean, I've gotten pieces here and there. I've gotten as much pretty much as any listener that's listened to pretty much every single episode. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's your secret sauce, really. And that tenacity, that the balls are what people lack. And you have that, and balls to spare too.
Yeah. It's funny. And thank you. I keep thinking of all these funny little, like, I'm like, oh yeah, that one time I was drinking and I got into an accident and I ended up on the roof of my car. Right. So like, just like me running into a tree and flipping over was like an everyday occurrence. But I'm hanging there and I hear like Hootie and the guy from Hootie and the Blowfish singing Wagon Wheel. I'm like, oh my God. Like I almost died. I'm hanging upside down in the car and all I can hear is Hootie. Like, man.
It makes sense in this story.
Yeah. I mean, there's just like so much living and the irony in the working out and the competing and the triathlons and the marathons, all these things is that none of it made me happy. Like, okay, so I'm checking those boxes. Like, yeah, that ain't it. Like, it made me want to compete more. And then my testosterone is like through the roof. Right. And then it's like, people would almost hit me with their cars. I'm jogging. I'm hitting cars. Like, well, look out, you asshole. Like that sort of a thing. I'm like, that's not me either. Right. So it was, that level of competition and like, what's next, what next. I had to run through that cycle as well. And like the complete and opposite level from a physical self-care perspective, because it still wasn't addressing the emotional underpinnings, right? And the spiritualness of it.
Yeah. Wow. Just a quick question. How did you meet Meredith? Were you like connected?
We met online.
Oh, okay. You met online. All right. That makes sense.
That was OK Cupid. And even at the time, like it was anything. And after my time at Hooters, I didn't really date. I had a certain profile, right? So I love people that just don't look anything like me, had completely different life experiences, right? So like ethnic women was great because I could just learn a lot. I mean, yeah, it's like, please take me to, what is it, Devon in Chicago and take me out for Pakistani food. Like, let's just go do that. Like that to me sounds great. I met some really wonderful people at that point in my life.
Chris, we're very similar, but yet we're very different. Our stories are very different. My story could be a Disney movie compared to your story, for sure. Complete with song and dance, musical, the whole bit. And I'm not trying to insult your story. I'm very amused, so let's just say. But we're very alike because it's like we've both been chasing the tada. We've both been chasing the high, but in very, very different ways. I just did a lot of self-work on this theme exactly. And I'm just realizing it's the same thing for you. You had tenacity unmatched by pretty much anyone. And you did a lot of really big things, like paid down, 6-figure child support and things like that. And good things people would consider dreams. Of big houses and things like that at 22. You got a lot of things accomplished, but you weren't happy. You were chasing a different script. You're chasing what everybody said you should be doing, very similar to me. And ultimately, through a series of turns in the corn maze, you discovered that that wasn't your script. It wasn't your happiness. Yeah. You're chasing the high, even, not just with substances, just with everything in life. You're chasing it. Yeah. So, Chris, that brings me to a very important question. What in 3 words? In 3 words, if
Uh-huh.
you could sum up the meaning of life based on your experiences and where you stand at this very moment, I'm very well aware it could change tomorrow. 3 words that you've discovered is the meaning of life for you. I'll give you a minute or 5.
Well, it's 4 words.
Okay, I'll take it.
Love and be loved.
Profound.
I got that message when I'd asked when I was young. So this is like when I was like 20, 21, 22, 23, that part. Like, what is the point of all of this? Like, what is going on? Like, why, what's the purpose of life? It's to love and be loved. I'm like, it can't be that simple. Like, people have written like books, they fought wars over all of this. And yet, as I'm closer and closer to where I am today, it's like, ah, yeah, love and be loved.
Might I add a 5th word in there?
Please.
Is there anywhere for myself?
Oh, yes. Yeah. When I say love and be loved,
Mm-hmm.
that is meant to be an overarching statement worth exploring.
Do you love yourself?
Very much so.
Great. Did you love yourself 20 years ago?
No,
Did you love yourself when you were a kid?
absolutely.
Oh. Did you love yourself when you met Meredith?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Did you love yourself at Hooters?
I loved loving others. God, the Christmas parties there were insane.
Well, I mean, I love myself at Hooters now, but I'm talking about the moment of time that you experienced being in charge of Hooters.
God, I was a kid,
Yeah.
I was a kid, and I remember the person that they hired was not the person that they had asked to leave. And they hired who they thought was a young family man, right? Kids, young wife. The one that left had piercings everywhere, had platinum blonde hair, and was, well, I think the straw that broke the camel's back was, um, I like sleeping with people.
I mean, thank you for your honesty and your candidness, Chris.
Yeah, it was, and there was, I mean, it was, fuck, it was like putting a sugar addict in Willy Wonka.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine as a heterosexual woman what it would be like to work at Hooters. But I'm trying to flip it to my favor, and yeah, I probably have a problem with that too.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I was fun. I wasn't there to hurt anyone, right?
Mhm.
And it was just always up for a good time. And it was a lot of I have 0 lasting relationships out of that time though. So which also tells you like, I left and I was like, okay, that's done. So then I'd run into someone like, God, I remember going to one of Meredith's friends' house. She went to high school with this guy, and the wife and I just hit it off and we're laughing, like, super relatable. And she's like, "Why don't tell many people this?" But back when I used to work at Hooters, and I was like, "Which one?" She's like, "Oh, it was like this one." And I was like, "That's where we know each other from." And she's like, "You." Right. Like, yeah, I was that guy.
Oh,
Like,
so enlighten us. Did you sleep with her?
no,
Oh,
but
okay.
like
She
some of
just
her
knew you.
friends. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it was I don't know, sex for me was interesting. And the hows and whys of it. And God, if I had just gone to a psychotherapist when I was in my early 20s, if I even knew that that was a thing, right? Just to help me start sorting through like all this shit I did. I didn't see a psychotherapist until I moved out to Santa Monica. And that was, you know, like to help me with the work situation. At least that's what I thought. And like, so all this stuff was just done on my own, and it doesn't have to be that way.
This brings up something I'd love to explore with you, because now that I know about your story, I do know little traces of when you were called into the spirituality aspect that you now exist in. And I know that we're kind of running out of time here. I would love to hear and explore that, because I've heard the tidbits, but now that I can see the puzzle itself, I'm just curious for you to insert them into the areas so that they make sense.
Yeah.
A little bit more.
Okay.
And
so I can do that briefly too. So 19. So one, when I was a kid and I had my experiences, which I think we've talked about this, where like entities would come in, I was being physically manipulated. I didn't know what those were at the time. I chalked it up to my imagination. Now I've come to understand that was different.
I remember that.
1990, light comes through the window. I thought it was my grandmother. My grandmother appeared to me, but there was a lot of love and light. And I woke up and felt so clean, so clear. And this is what, I was 17 at the time. Yeah. And I never experienced that sort of like light and cleansing, and just everything looked so refreshed. And it was then chasing like that experience. Like, and I had described it to be in my paternal grandmother and her presence, which it was to a degree, but it was much bigger than that. Then walking down the street in Chicago during one of those struggling periods, and this quote came into my mind. I used to go to Johnny Coleman's church on the south side of Chicago. So it was like one of those 10,000 people mega churches. And that's where I first was introduced to Paramahansa Yogananda, ironically. So I used to buy like these cassette tapes that her and other people that were speaking. And this quote's not from him, but it was from the Bible. And it was something like, you know, thou shalt decree a thing, and that thing shall be established unto you according to your circumstances. And I remember thinking that and thinking that and thinking that and thinking that and thinking that. And I was walking down the street, and all of a sudden I just got that, like that feeling, you know, the feeling I'm talking about, where you just feel light and everything is just resonating.
Yes.
So I'd get these little sprinkles. And then when I hit that semi with my car in the early 90s, there's no reason why I should have hit a truck on a highway and not died. So that was one of my two, when I'd seen a palm reader at some New Year's Eve thing with my ex-wife, and it's like, well, if you make it past these two things, you're going to live a long life. So that was the first one. The second DUI, similar situation. But then like I'd started getting these messages like, what's the purpose of life? Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm at my wit's end. Life is not working for me. What do I do next? And I would hear what I thought was my own voice, which it very well could have been. And then started leaning into that more and more, and then start trusting it. Now, when I saw the psychotherapist and was dealing with some work stuff, but I remember talking to a friend of mine in Chicago that I was a coworker, and we were having lunch in West Loop. We were talking about spirituality, and which for me is just like a passion project or a hobby. So this is pre working with other people. He's like, I see someone as well. And this is the second time I had heard about this. I see someone. They help kind of map out, the course of events over the next year. And her name's Linda. She's in Chicago. She's like a grandma. You should check it out, but it's the Akashic Records. So I was like, oh, like I didn't know that he would have been into that. He doesn't come across that way. And then within weeks, like this yoga studio, they just magically appeared in Santa Monica. It's like, oh, we're doing this thing with the Akashic Records. You should come take a look at it. And I think I've talked about this on a podcast, but Helen was there. And then at that point in my life, like, okay, compared to where I had been, like I live in Santa Monica. I've got a yoga teacher for a wife. I have a house with a backyard. I'm making great money. Like, fuck, like I'm playing with house money. Like, what's next? Right? Like, how good can this get? And how can we really help people? So when I went into the records or that experience, and it was around, I've got all this going for me now. How do we just take advantage of it? Because I know that life isn't going to be like this for forever. And then just started exploring that with Helen. And then it's like, I think I'm supposed to learn how to do it. And then from there, it's here we are. But I've had some wonderful teachers, certainly Helen, Carlos Warter. I don't think I've spoken too much about him.
You haven't.
Connected with him last night. He's remarkable, and we should probably just do that. He's a transpersonal psychologist amongst many, many other things. And it's just so funny to me now, Christine, I shared this with Meredith last night, like a lot of the things that he was talking about. So last night we talked about education and the broken college system. And we talked about competition. And these are things that I think about and I write about, and I'm not putting that out there necessarily. So I did do some on education as part of democracy, but it's like, how do I then get to a place where I trust myself and trust the message enough? Where it's like, I don't need the doctorates. I don't need all of this, and really just being of service. So at the end of the day, it's really working on myself. And if it helps other people and just telling the story, then that's more than enough. And I just want to help. Like, I want to run up and down the hill for people and with people.
Well, thank you for telling your story.
There's so much. Yeah, no, thank you for holding the space. I think it's important to give a baseline. Like, it's the real Chris McCann for a reason, because it forces me to be accountable to myself and to other people. I'm not sugarcoating any of it. And
now I get it.
Yep.
as does everyone else.
Yes. Hey, Dad.
Oh yeah, he's gonna know everything. I mean, I'm sure he already does, but
Right. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, love and be loved. Chris, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Always. Now, big news next week, Christina. Next week is when we start this whole thing. We go into season 2 of the King and McCann podcast, which can even have like a brand new operating name too. So maybe we should have a conversation around that. But next week we're going to start coaching people. We're going to, if anyone has questions on what that looks like, take a look at the episode with Meredith. That's really the rundown. We do it. We'll do deep coaching with you. The catch is that we're going to do it, and we're going to do it live. And we don't always know where things are going to go, but it's always for your highest good and the highest good of everyone that you're connected with. So
ditto. And I'm so excited because we're going to be doing what we do.
Yeah. It's going to be great. We don't ever have to worry about a topic.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't really worried in the first place, but even better. I like doing. So we're going to be doing it.
Yes.
Next week.
Oh, that's a Prince song. I love Prince. Yes. All right.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Chris. You're the best.
Mwah.
Mwah.